Welcome back to Mind X Millions. In Part 1 of the 48 Laws of Power, we explored Laws 1 to 24 and discovered powerful lessons about reputation, influence, strategy, perception, and human nature. But our journey is only halfway complete. In this part, we'll explore the remaining Laws 25 to 48, where Robert Greene reveals deeper insights into power, leadership, adaptability, self-control, and the psychology of success. So stay focused, keep an open mind, and let's continue our journey through the 48 Laws of Power. Now, let's begin.
Chapter 25. Recreate Yourself. Imagine an actor stepping onto a stage every night. On stage, he is not himself. He becomes a character. He changes voice, posture, emotions, and identity depending on the role. The audience does not judge him for who he is in real life. They judge him for how convincingly he plays the role. Now imagine a person who treats life itself like a stage. Instead of being trapped in a fixed identity, he learns to shape how he is seen. He adapts, evolves, and consciously builds the version of himself that creates the most opportunity, respect, and influence. This is the essence of Robert Greene's 25th Law of Power. Recreate yourself. At its core, this law is about identity. Greene argues that many people live their lives as if their personality, reputation, and role are fixed. They believe they are this type of person or that type of person, and they rarely question it. But in reality, identity is more flexible than people assume. Think about how different you are in different situations. With friends, you may be relaxed and humorous. With teachers or authority figures, you may be more careful and respectful. In stressful situations, you may become more serious and focused. You are already adapting constantly. Greene's idea is to take conscious control of that adaptation. Instead of letting life shape your identity by accident, you actively shape it with intention. Imagine two professionals starting in the same industry. The first allows his identity to be shaped by circumstances. He reacts to situations, follows expectations, and slowly becomes defined by how others see him. The second deliberately builds a personal identity. She chooses what skills to develop, how to present herself, what reputation to cultivate, and what direction her life should take. Over time, their paths diverge significantly. Why? Because one is reactive, while the other is intentional. Greene suggests that power often comes from self-definition. When you define yourself clearly, others are more likely to respond to that definition. But when you do not define yourself, others will define you for you. Think about a new employee entering a company. If they do not establish how they want to be seen, colleagues may assign labels based on first impressions, like quiet, aggressive, inexperienced, or support staff. But if the employee consciously demonstrates reliability, skill, and initiative, a different identity forms. That identity can shape future opportunities. One of the key ideas in this chapter is transformation. Greene emphasizes that growth requires change, and change requires letting go of fixed self-images. Many people resist change because they are attached to who they think they are. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not a leader. I'm not creative. These identities feel permanent, but they are often just habits and assumptions. Greene challenges this limitation. He suggests that powerful individuals are willing to reinvent themselves when necessary. Think about successful entrepreneurs. Many did not start with their final identity. They evolved over time. They learned new skills. They adapted to new environments. They redefined how the world sees them. Another important aspect of this law is image. Greene explains that perception plays a major role in influence. People respond not only to what you do, but to the image you project. This does not mean being fake. It means being intentional. For example, two people may have similar abilities, but one presents herself with clarity and confidence, while the other appears uncertain and inconsistent. The perception alone can create different outcomes. Imagine a speaker on stage. One speaker hesitates, apologizes frequently, and lacks structure. Another speaks clearly, confidently, and with presence. The message may be similar, but the impact is completely different. Greene's point is that you are not only who you are also how you are perceived, and that perception can be shaped. Another powerful idea in this chapter is reinvention after failure. Many people allow setbacks to define them permanently. A failed business becomes their identity. A mistake becomes their label. A rejection becomes their limitation. But Greene suggests that failure can also be a turning point for reinvention. Instead of accepting a negative identity, you can rebuild a stronger one. Think about public figures who reinvented themselves after setbacks. Many transformed failure into new direction by changing strategy, mindset, and presentation. Reinvention is not erasing the past. It is learning from it and building something stronger. However, Greene also warns against reckless identity changes. Reinvention must be strategic, not chaotic. Constantly changing who you are without direction creates confusion rather than power. The goal is not to become unstable. The goal is to become intentional. For entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals, this lesson is especially powerful. Markets change, opportunities shift, industries evolve. Those who remain rigid often struggle to adapt. Those who are willing to evolve often find new paths to success. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Most people accept their identity as fixed, but those who rise higher often treat identity as something they can shape. The deeper lesson is simple. Do not let circumstances define you. Do not allow others to write your story. Observe yourself, refine yourself, redesign your direction when needed. Because in life, the person who can consciously recreate themselves gains the ability to adapt, evolve, and stay relevant in a changing world. And that is the power of recreating yourself. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Design your identity intentionally. 2. Keep improving yourself. 3. Build a strong personal brand. 4. Don't let your past define you. 5. Adapt to new opportunities.
Chapter 26. Keep your hands clean. Imagine a powerful king sitting on his throne. He issues orders. He makes decisions. He shapes the direction of the kingdom. But when something goes wrong, when a harsh punishment is carried out, when a controversial decision causes anger, when people suffer, he is nowhere to be seen. The blame falls on advisors, generals, or messengers. The king remains untouched. This is the essence of Robert Greene's 26th law of power. Keep your hands clean. At its core, this law is about responsibility, perception, and distance from consequences. Greene argues that in systems of power, actions often have visible consequences, but the person in charge is not always the one who appears responsible for them. Instead, effective power often involves maintaining a layer of separation between yourself and actions that could damage your reputation.
Think about a business environment. A company makes a difficult decision like layoffs or restructuring. If the CEO directly delivers every painful message in a blunt and emotional way, public perception may turn negative quickly. But if communication is carefully managed through different levels, the leader can maintain authority while minimizing personal blame. The idea is not about avoiding responsibility entirely. It is about managing perception wisely. Greene explains that people naturally focus their emotions on the most visible source of a decision. When something goes wrong, they look for a face to attach to the outcome. If that face is yours, you absorb the full emotional reaction. If the responsibility is shared or delegated, the emotional pressure is distributed. Think about historical governments and leaders. Often unpopular decisions were carried out by officials acting on orders. The leader remained more distant from direct blame, preserving authority even when actions were controversial. The same principle appears in modern organizations. Managers often delegate difficult tasks so that relationships in leadership positions are not directly damaged by every unpopular action. One key idea in this chapter is indirect influence. Greene suggests that power is often more effective when it operates through others rather than through direct exposure. If you are constantly visible in every conflict, every decision, and every negative outcome, your reputation becomes vulnerable. But if you guide decisions through systems, teams, and processes, you maintain more control over how you are perceived. Imagine a team leader. The first leader directly confronts every problem, every disagreement, every mistake, personally. Over time, they become associated with conflict and tension. The second leader builds a structure where issues are handled appropriately through team members, while still maintaining oversight and direction. The second leader often appears calmer, more stable, and more respected. Greene also highlights an important psychological insight. People tend to respect authority more when it is not constantly entangled in visible conflict. If someone is always directly involved in every negative situation, their image can become associated with disorder. But when a leader appears composed and slightly removed from the chaos, their authority often appears stronger. Think about a movie director. The director guides the entire production, but audiences do not see them solving every on-set issue or dealing with every technical problem. They see the final product, not the messy process behind it. This separation helps preserve the director's image of control and vision. However, Greene also warns that this law must be used carefully. Avoiding responsibility entirely can destroy trust. If people feel that you are constantly shifting blame or hiding behind others, your influence will weaken. The goal is not to escape accountability. The goal is to manage visibility. There is a difference between strategic delegation and avoidance of responsibility. Strategic delegation strengthens systems. Avoidance of responsibility weakens trust. Another important idea in this chapter is emotional protection. When you are not directly associated with every negative outcome, you preserve your ability to make decisions without being overwhelmed by emotional backlash. This allows for clearer thinking and better long-term strategy. Think about an investor. If every investment decision is made publicly and tied directly to their personal identity, every loss becomes emotionally heavier. But if decisions are structured, analyzed, and separated through systems, the emotional impact is more manageable, allowing for better consistency over time. Greene's point is that maintaining distance from certain consequences allows for better control of your overall influence. This does not mean avoiding honesty. It means avoiding unnecessary exposure. It means understanding that perception is part of power. As the chapter develops, Greene emphasizes that powerful individuals often manage responsibility carefully. They ensure that credit is shared when outcomes are positive, and responsibility is distributed when outcomes are negative. This balance helps maintain long-term influence. In leadership, entrepreneurship, and politics, this principle is frequently visible. Great leaders understand that every action creates perception, and perception shapes authority. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a key realization. Power is not only about what you do, but also about how visible you are in what happens afterwards. The deeper lesson is simple. Be aware of how responsibility is assigned. Be careful about direct exposure to unnecessary blame. Use structure, delegation, and strategy to manage outcomes. Because those who remain constantly at the center of every consequence often become targets. But those who understand how to separate action from perception often maintain stronger, longer-lasting influence. And that is the power of keeping your hands clean. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Protect your reputation. 2. Avoid unnecessary conflicts. 3. Maintain professionalism. 4. Take responsibility wisely. 5. Stay above petty disputes.
Chapter 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. Imagine a crowd standing in front of a stage. They are not just listening to a speaker, they are searching for something deeper, meaning, direction, certainty, hope, something that makes the confusion of life feel simpler. The speaker notices this. Instead of overwhelming them with complex logic, he gives them a clear message, a vision, a story that feels simple, powerful, and emotionally satisfying. Slowly, the crowd leans in. They begin to believe not just in the message, but in the person delivering it. This is the foundation of Robert Greene's 27th Law of Power. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. At its core, this law is about human psychology. Greene argues that people do not always act based on logic alone. In fact, in many situations, people are driven by emotion, uncertainty, and the deep desire for meaning. When life feels complex or unstable, people naturally look for something that feels certain, something they can believe in without constant doubt. Think about a leader in a time of crisis. When everything is unclear, people don't always want more complicated explanations. They want clarity. They want direction. They want someone who seems certain. A strong leader understands this need and provides a vision that people can rally around, not necessarily because it is perfectly rational in every detail, but because it gives direction and emotional stability. Greene explains that influence becomes powerful when you tap into this psychological need. Imagine 2 communicators. The first presents ideas with hesitation. He constantly qualifies every statement, adds complexity, and avoids strong conclusions. The second speaks with clarity and confidence. He tells a compelling story, simplifies complex ideas, and presents a clear direction. Which one is more likely to attract a following? Usually the second, because people are often drawn to certainty even when the world itself is uncertain. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that belief is powerful. People want to believe in something larger than themselves, a mission, a vision, a purpose. A leader who understands this can inspire loyalty that goes beyond simple logic. Think about successful movements in history. Many did not grow only through facts and arguments, but through emotional connection and shared belief. Greene emphasizes that this does not necessarily mean deception. It is about understanding how people think and what they need emotionally. However, this is also where caution becomes important. When belief is used irresponsibly, it can become severe. That is why Greene often highlights the dual nature of power. It can be constructive or destructive depending on how it's used. In everyday life, this principle appears in many forms. A teacher who inspires students does not simply provide information. He creates belief in possibility.
A business leader does not only describe products, she builds belief in value and transformation. A coach does not just give instructions, he builds belief in improvement and success. The common thread is emotional connection. Greene argues that rational arguments alone rarely create strong loyalty. People may understand information, but they do not always feel connected to it. Belief, however, creates emotional attachment. Another important idea in this chapter is simplicity. When messages are too complex, they lose emotional impact. When ideas are simplified into clear stories or visions, they become easier to accept and remember. Think about brands that succeed globally. They often do not communicate complicated messages. Instead, they focus on simple, powerful ideas that people can believe in and identify with. Greene also highlights that people often want leaders to appear confident, even when certainty is not fully possible. In uncertain environments, hesitation can weaken influence. Confidence, on the other hand, creates stability, even if the situation itself is unstable. This is why presentation matters as much as content. However, Greene warns that belief-based influence must be handled carefully. If people eventually realize that their trust was manipulated or misused, the backlash can be severe. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it is difficult to rebuild. So the key is balance. Provide clarity, but do not distort reality. Inspire belief, but remain grounded in truth. Lead, but do not exploit. Think about a startup founder pitching an idea. If they overwhelm investors with technical details, the message may lose emotional appeal. But if they communicate a clear vision, what problem is being solved, and why it matters, people are more likely to connect with it. This is the power of belief-driven communication. As the chapter progresses, Greene emphasizes that most people are looking for meaning, especially in uncertain times. Those who can provide a sense of direction often gain influence quickly, but that influence must be used responsibly to remain sustainable. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. People do not only follow facts, they follow meaning, they follow vision, they follow belief. The deeper lesson is simple. Understand what people need emotionally. Communicate with clarity and purpose. Build trust through consistency and vision. Because when people believe in something or someone, they become deeply committed. And that belief can become one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. That is the power of playing on people's need to believe. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. People seek meaning and purpose. 2. Strong visions attract followers. 3. Communicate clearly. 4. Inspire confidence. 5. Lead with conviction.
Chapter 28. Enter action with boldness. Imagine 2 people standing at the edge of a swimming pool. The water is cold, and both of them hesitate. The first person slowly puts one foot in, then pulls it back, then tests again. He thinks too much, doubts too much, and keeps delaying the jump. The more he hesitates, the harder it becomes. The second person runs, takes one breath, and jumps straight in. No overthinking, no delay, just action. Within moments, the second person is adjusting to the water, already swimming, already comfortable. Meanwhile, the first person is still standing at the edge. This simple contrast is the heart of Robert Greene's 28th law of power: enter action with boldness. Greene argues that hesitation is one of the greatest enemies of power. When people act uncertain, they create doubt not only in their own mind, but also in the minds of others. Boldness, on the other hand, creates immediate psychological impact. It signals confidence, control, and direction. In many situations, people do not respond to the correctness of your action first. They respond to the strength behind it. Think about a business meeting.
Two people present similar ideas. One presents slowly, nervously, constantly questioning himself. The idea may be good, but the lack of confidence makes others unsure. The other presents clearly, decisively, without unnecessary hesitation. Even if the idea is not perfect, the confidence behind it creates trust. The difference is not just the idea, it is boldness. Greene explains that bold action often wins because it shapes perception. People assume that confident action must be backed by preparation or strength. Even when uncertainty exists, boldness hides it. This is why in many real-world situations, those who move first with confidence gain advantage. Think about negotiations. The first person to make a clear offer often sets the tone of the discussion. Hesitation can signal weakness, giving the other side more control. But boldness can shift the balance of power. However, Greene also emphasizes that boldness is not recklessness. There's a difference between acting boldly and acting carelessly. Boldness is calculated confidence. It is the ability to act without displaying internal fear, even when uncertainty exists. Imagine a military commander. If he appears confused, the army becomes anxious. But if he gives clear orders with confidence, even in difficult situations, soldiers are more likely to follow. The same principle applies in leadership, business, and personal life. People are drawn to certainty. They trust direction. They respond to confidence. One of the key ideas in this chapter is hesitation creates opportunity for doubt to grow. When you hesitate too long, others begin to question your ability. They may assume you are unprepared or unsure. Even your own confidence weakens. But when you act boldly, you close the space for doubt. Greene also points out that boldness can disrupt power dynamics. In many situations, people expect hesitation. They expect caution. They expect delay. When someone acts decisively instead, it changes expectations. Think about an entrepreneur pitching a startup. If they hesitate, investors may lose interest. But if they present their vision with bold clarity, even risky ideas can feel more compelling. Boldness does not eliminate risk, it changes perception of risk. Another important idea in this chapter is momentum. Once bold action begins, it often creates its own energy. The hardest part is starting. After action begins, confidence builds naturally. Think about public speaking. The first few seconds are often the hardest, but once the speaker gains momentum, nervousness fades and flow takes over. Greene encourages readers to understand that delay often increases fear. The longer you wait, the more your mind builds imagined obstacles. Bold action interrupts that cycle. However, Greene also warns against blind boldness. Acting boldly without preparation can lead to failure. True power comes from combining preparation with decisive action. You think carefully, prepare thoroughly, then act without hesitation. Another important lesson in this chapter is perception management. People often judge the outcome of your actions through the confidence you display while acting. Even uncertain situations can appear controlled if handled boldly. Think about leaders during crises. Those who remain calm and decisive often inspire trust, even when solutions are not immediately clear. Their boldness stabilizes others. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. In many moments of life, the difference between success and failure is not intelligence alone. It is action, and more specifically, bold action. The deeper lesson is simple. Do not let hesitation control you. Do not overthink until opportunity disappears. Prepare, decide, and move. Because when you enter action with boldness, you shape how others see you and how you see yourself. And that confidence can turn uncertainty into advantage. That is the power of entering action with boldness. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Confidence creates momentum. 2. Hesitation weakens opportunities. 3. Act decisively. 4. Take calculated risks. 5. Believe in your abilities.
Chapter 29. Plan all the way to the end. Imagine a chess player sitting in front of the board. A beginner looks only at the next move. He moves a piece, reacts to the opponent, and hopes things work out. A master looks much deeper. Before moving, he imagines how the entire game might unfold. He considers consequences, traps, countermoves, and final outcomes. He is not just thinking about now, he is thinking about the end. That difference in thinking is the foundation of Robert Greene's 29th law of power: plan all the way to the end. Greene argues that one of the most common reasons people fail is not lack of effort, but lack of foresight. Many people start actions with enthusiasm, but do not think deeply about where those actions will lead. As a result, they are forced to react constantly instead of controlling the direction of events. Think about someone starting a business. They focus on launching the product, getting customers, and generating excitement, but they fail to think about long-term challenges, competition, scaling, financial sustainability, or market changes. In the beginning, everything feels positive, but later, problems appear that were never planned for. Now compare this with someone who thinks ahead. Before even starting, they imagine multiple stages of growth. They consider risks, obstacles, and possible outcomes. They prepare strategies not only for success, but also for setbacks. When challenges come, they are not surprised, because they already thought about the end. Greene explains that power often belongs to those who think further into the future than others. When you can anticipate consequences before they happen, you reduce uncertainty and increase control. Imagine a traveler planning a journey. One traveler only plans the first step. He starts walking without knowing where he will stay, what route he will take, or what challenges he might face along the way. Which traveler is more likely to reach the destination smoothly? Usually the second, because preparation reduces chaos. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that actions create chains of consequences. Every decision leads to another decision. Every move opens certain possibilities and closes others. If you do not think ahead, you become trapped by consequences you did not expect. Greene also emphasizes that emotions often prevent long-term thinking. In the heat of the moment, people act quickly. They react to anger, excitement, fear, or pressure. But these reactions often create unintended outcomes. Think about an argument between two people. In the moment, one person says something harsh without thinking about the long-term impact. The immediate emotion feels justified, but later the damage to the relationship becomes difficult to repair. If they had thought about the end, they might have acted differently. Greene encourages readers to slow down mentally before making important decisions. Ask yourself, where will this lead? What happens next? And after that? What is the final outcome of this path? This kind of thinking creates strategic awareness. Another important idea in this chapter is control. People who think only short-term are often controlled by circumstances. They react to events as they happen. But people who think long-term often shape events before they unfold. They are not just reacting, they are directing. Think about an investor. A short-term thinker buys and sells based on immediate trends. A long-term thinker studies patterns, understands cycles, and makes decisions based on future expectations. The second investor is less affected by temporary fluctuations because they already considered long-term outcomes.
Greene also warns about blind optimism. Many people assume things will work out without planning. They rely on hope instead of strategy. But hope without planning often leads to disappointment. Planning reduces uncertainty. It does not eliminate risk, but it prepares you for it. Another important lesson in this chapter is discipline. Thinking ahead requires patience. It requires resisting the urge to act immediately without understanding consequences. It requires seeing beyond the present moment. Think about a builder constructing a house. If the foundation is not planned properly, the entire structure becomes unstable. But if the foundation is carefully designed, the building can last for years. The same principle applies to decisions in life. Strong foundations require foresight. Greene emphasizes that successful people often behave like strategists. They don't just think about winning today, they think about sustaining success tomorrow. They consider how today's actions will affect their reputation, relationships, and opportunities in the future. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Most people focus on the immediate moment, but power belongs to those who see further ahead. The deeper lesson is simple. Do not act without thinking through consequences. Do not stop at the first result. Follow the chain of events all the way to the end. Because when you understand where your actions lead, you gain control over outcomes instead of being controlled by them. And that's the power of planning all the way to the end. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Think long-term. 2. Anticipate obstacles. 3. Consider consequences. 4. Prepare backup plans. 5. Focus on desired outcomes.
Chapter 30. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. Imagine watching a master magician perform a trick. The audience sees something impossible. Objects appear, disappear, or transform in ways that seem to defy logic. What they don't see is the years of practice behind every smooth movement. The effort, the repetition, the failures, all of it is hidden behind a calm, effortless performance. To the audience, it looks easy. That illusion is the point. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 30th law of power. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. Greene argues that people are naturally drawn to ease and grace. When something looks too difficult or forced, it loses appeal. But when success appears smooth and natural, it creates admiration, respect, and even awe. Think about a professional athlete. When a basketball player makes a difficult shot look simple, the crowd is impressed not only by the result, but how effortless it appeared. If the same shot looked strained or clumsy, the impact would be less powerful. The same outcome, but very different perception. Greene explains that effortlessness is not about actually doing things easily. It is about concealing struggle. Behind every smooth performance is usually intense preparation, discipline, and repetition. But revealing that struggle often weakens perception. Imagine 2 professionals giving a presentation. One constantly talks about how hard it was to prepare. He mentions sleepless nights, stress, and difficulty. The audience begins to focus on the struggle instead of the message. The other presents calmly and confidently without drawing attention to the effort behind it. The presentation feels smooth and controlled. Which one appears more powerful? Usually the second, because people tend to admire control, not struggle. One of the key lessons in this chapter is visible effort can reduce perceived mastery. When people see you struggling too openly, they may assume you are not fully in control, but when they see ease, they assume competence.
Greene is not saying that effort is unnecessary. In fact, he emphasizes that real power requires discipline, training, and hard work. The difference lies in presentation. Think about a musician performing on stage. The audience hears beautiful music, not the countless hours of practice. The performer does not show frustration or struggle during the performance. Everything appears fluid. That illusion creates value. Another important idea in this chapter is emotional control. When people reveal too much strain, frustration, or pressure, they lose authority in the eyes of others. But when they remain composed, even under pressure, they appear stronger. The perception of control becomes as important as control itself. Greene also highlights the importance of natural style. Some people try too hard to impress. They over-explain, over-demonstrate, and over-perform. Instead of appearing capable, they appear forced. True power often lies in subtlety. When actions appear natural, they are more convincing. Think about a skilled public speaker. The best speakers do not appear to be trying hard to impress. Their words flow naturally. Their confidence feels effortless. Their presence feels stable. Behind that ease is usually deep preparation, but the audience experiences only smooth execution. Greene also warns against revealing the mechanics behind success too openly. When you constantly show how difficult something is, people begin to focus on the difficulty instead of the achievement. When you hide the struggle, they focus on the achievement. This does not mean pretending everything is easy in life. It means being strategic about what you reveal. In business, for example, companies often highlight results rather than process struggles. Customers see a polished product, not the long internal journey behind it. That presentation builds trust and admiration. Another important lesson in this chapter is psychological influence. People are naturally drawn to what appears elegant and controlled. It creates a sense of superiority and inspiration. They think, "I want to be like that." If everything appears chaotic or difficult, it creates the opposite reaction, resistance or doubt. Greene suggests that appearances often shape influence more than raw effort does. Think about leadership again. A leader who constantly shows stress may unintentionally lower team morale, but a leader who absorbs pressure quietly and presents calm direction often strengthens confidence in others. This does not mean hiding reality completely. It means managing emotional signals carefully. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Behind most visible success is invisible effort, but power often lies in what people do not see. The deeper lesson is simple. Work hard in private, refine your skills quietly, prepare thoroughly, but present your results with calmness and ease. Because when your success looks effortless, people assume mastery, and that perception itself becomes a form of power. That is the power of making your accomplishments seem effortless. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Master your craft. 2. Prepare behind the scenes. 3. Avoid bragging. 4. Let results speak. 5. Create confidence through competence.
Chapter 31. Control the options. Get others to play with the cards you deal. Imagine you're playing a game of cards. You are not allowed to choose your own cards. Instead, someone else places 2 or 3 options in front of you. You can pick any one of them, but all of them were prepared by the other player. It feels like you have freedom, but in reality, your choices were already designed. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 31st Law of Power. Control the options. Get others to play with the cards you deal. Greene argues that one of the most subtle forms of influence is not forcing people to do something directly, but shaping the choices in front of them so that whatever they choose still benefits you. Think about a simple everyday example. A restaurant menu. You feel like you are freely choosing your meal, but in reality, every option on the menu was selected, designed, and priced by the restaurant owner. Your freedom exists inside a controlled structure. The same principle applies in many areas of life. Imagine a manager giving an employee two options. Option A, work overtime this weekend and finish an important project. Option B, decline, but miss out on a bonus or future opportunity. On the surface, it looks like a choice, but both outcomes were designed to push toward a preferred result. Greene explains that real power often comes from structuring situations so that others feel they are making decisions freely, while the direction has already been guided. Think about negotiations. A skilled negotiator rarely asks open-ended questions like, "Do you agree or not?" Instead, they present structured options. Would you prefer option A or option B? In both cases, agreement is being guided, but the second approach feels less confrontational and more acceptable. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that people resist direct control, but they accept structured choice. When you tell someone exactly what to do, they may resist. But when you give them limited options, they feel in control, even if all options lead toward your desired outcome. This is why framing is so powerful. Imagine a salesperson. A weak salesperson says, "Do you want to buy this?" A stronger salesperson says, "Would you like the standard package or the premium one?" The second approach assumes a decision will be made and simply guides the direction of that decision. Greene emphasizes that influence often works best when it is invisible. When people feel forced, they resist. When people feel free, they cooperate. Another important idea in this chapter is psychological comfort. Humans prefer making choices within structure rather than facing unlimited possibilities. Too many options can actually create confusion, but a few well-designed options create clarity. Power comes from designing that clarity. Think about leadership. A leader who gives too many vague directions creates confusion, but a leader who presents clear pathways helps shape outcomes more effectively. The team feels organized, but the direction is already influenced. Greene also highlights that control of options is often more effective than direct persuasion. Instead of arguing with someone to convince them, you shape the environment in which their decision happens. For example, in business, pricing strategies often guide customer decisions without any direct pressure. Customers believe they are choosing freely, but the structure of the options subtly guides behavior. This is a key insight. Control does not always require force. Sometimes it requires design. Think about social situations. A person who constantly tries to convince others directly may face resistance, but a person who quietly shapes the situation, what is discussed, what is available, what is considered normal, can influence outcomes more effectively. However, Greene also warns that this strategy must be used carefully. If people realize that their options are manipulated too obviously, trust can break. The key is subtlety. The control must not be visible. It must feel natural. Another important lesson in this chapter is foresight. When you designed options for others, you are also shaping outcomes for yourself. If done well, it reduces uncertainty and increases predictability in results. Think about a project manager. Instead of letting team members randomly choose how to proceed, the manager provides structured paths aligned with the final goal.
This increases efficiency and reduces wasted effort. The same principle applies in strategy, leadership, and negotiation. Greene's deeper message is that power often comes from shaping environments rather than reacting to them. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Most people believe they are making completely free choices. But in many situations, the choices themselves are already shaped by someone else. The deeper lesson is simple. Do not rely only on persuasion. Learn to structure situations. Design options carefully. Guide decisions without forcing them. Because when you control the options, you often control the outcome. And that is the power of making others play with the cards you deal. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Frame choices strategically. 2. Guide decisions. 3. Create favorable alternatives. 4. Think ahead. 5. Maintain influence over outcomes.
Chapter 32. Play to people's fantasies. Imagine a tired worker finishing a long day. Reality feels heavy. Bills, pressure, responsibilities, and uncertainty all stack up. Then he opens his phone and watches a short video of a luxury lifestyle. Fast cars, beautiful places, effortless success. For a few minutes, he feels something different. Escape, desire, possibility. He is no longer in his reality. He is inside a fantasy. This is the core of Robert Greene's 32nd law of power. Play to people's fantasies. Greene argues that reality is often difficult for people to accept. It is complex, slow, and full of struggle. But fantasy is simple, emotional, and satisfying. Because of this, people are naturally drawn to ideas, messages, and leaders that offer an escape from harsh reality into something more appealing. Think about a politician giving a speech. One version of the speech is full of hard truths, limitations, and difficult trade-offs. Another version presents hope, certainty, and a vision of a better future that feels achievable and inspiring. Which one attracts more attention? Often the second. Not because people are irrational, but because fantasy provides emotional relief. Greene explains that people do not always want raw truth. Sometimes they want meaning. Sometimes they want hope. Sometimes they want a story that makes life feel more manageable. Think about entertainment. Movies, music, stories, they all rely on fantasy to create emotional experience. The audience knows it is not real, but they still enjoy it because it satisfies emotional needs that reality does not always fulfill. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that fantasy is not the opposite of truth. It is the emotional interpretation of truth. In business, marketing, leadership, and communication, those who understand this often gain influence faster than those who focus only on facts. Imagine 2 brands selling the same product. The first brand only describes features, what it does, how it works, and its technical details. The second brand tells a story, how the product improves lifestyle, creates identity, and connects to aspiration. Even if both products are similar, the second often feels more powerful. Because people do not just buy products, they buy the feeling of what the product represents. Greene emphasizes that fantasy works because it speaks to desire rather than logic. Desire is a strong motivator. People want to feel successful, important, safe, admired, or free.
When something aligns with those desires, they naturally pay attention. Think about social media. Much of it is built on curated images, highlights, and idealized moments. It is not always full reality, it's selected reality designed to evoke emotion and aspiration. Greene's point is not judgmental, it is observational. Human beings are drawn to idealized life. Another important idea in this chapter is emotional escape. When life feels difficult, people seek alternatives that feel lighter, easier, or more meaningful. Fantasy provides that escape, even temporarily. A powerful communicator understands this need and offers a narrative that fulfills it. Think about storytelling. Great stories are not just information, they are emotional journeys. They allow people to experience success, struggle, hope, and resolution in a condensed form. That emotional journey creates attachment. Greene also highlights that those who deal only in harsh reality often struggle to gain influence. Pure realism can feel cold, heavy, or discouraging. But reality combined with aspiration becomes powerful. This does not mean lying or misleading people. It means understanding how people process information emotionally. For example, a teacher who only presents difficult facts may lose student interest, but a teacher who connects those facts to purpose, growth, and possibility often engages students more effectively. The same applies in leadership. A leader who only emphasizes problems may demotivate a team, but a leader who acknowledges challenges while also presenting a compelling vision can inspire action. Greene also warns that fantasy can be misused. If people are repeatedly shown illusions without substance, trust eventually breaks. Fantasy must be supported by some level of reality to remain sustainable. Otherwise, it becomes empty. The strongest influence comes from balancing truth with aspiration. Think about entrepreneurship. A startup that only promises unrealistic dreams without execution fails quickly. But a startup that combines vision with real progress can attract belief and support. As the chapter develops, Greene emphasizes that people often prefer hope over discomfort. This is why storytelling, visions, and stories are so powerful in shaping perception and influence. They give structure to emotion. They give direction to desire. They give meaning to uncertainty. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. People are not only guided by facts, they are guided by imagination. The deeper lesson is simple. Understand what people desire. Speak to their emotions, not just their logic. Create meaning, not just information. Because when you engage people's fantasies, you capture attention, loyalty, and imagination. And that's the power of playing to people's fantasies. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Understand dreams and aspirations. 2. Inspire hope. 3. Connect emotionally. 4. Sell possibilities, not just facts. 5. Create compelling visions.
Chapter 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew. Imagine a skilled locksmith trying to open a complex lock. He doesn't force it, he doesn't break it. Instead, he carefully studies the mechanism until he finds the exact weak point, the one small pressure point that makes the entire system respond. Once he finds it, the lock becomes easy to open. People, Greene suggests, are not so different from locks. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 33rd law of power: discover each man's thumbscrew. At its heart, this law is about human psychology. Every person has emotional pressure points, deep desires, fears, insecurities, ambitions, or sensitivities that strongly influence their behavior. If you can identify these thumbscrews, you can better understand what motivates people, what affects their decisions, and what shapes their reactions. Think about a workplace scenario. Two employees may look equally confident on the surface, but one may be highly motivated by recognition, while the other is driven by financial security. One may fear public embarrassment, while another may fear being ignored. If you treat both people the same way, you may not influence them effectively. But if you understand what truly matters to each of them, your communication becomes more powerful. Greene argues that most people reveal their thumbscrews through behavior, not words. How they react under stress, what they complain about, what they celebrate, what they avoid. These patterns reveal what matters most to them. Imagine a manager trying to motivate a team. One employee responds strongly to praise. Another responds more to responsibility. Another is motivated by competition. Another values stability. A single approach will not work for all of them, but a tailored approach based on understanding each person's psychological triggers becomes highly effective. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that influence depends on emotional insight. People are not moved equally by logic alone. They are moved by personal relevance. If you can connect your message to what someone already cares about deeply, your influence increases dramatically. Think about marketing. Successful advertisements rarely focus only on product features. Instead, they connect the product to emotional needs, status, comfort, confidence, safety, or belonging. The product becomes a solution to a personal desire. Greene emphasizes that discovering someone's thumbscrew is not about manipulation in a crude sense. It is about understanding human nature deeply enough to communicate effectively. However, this knowledge can be used in both positive and negative ways, which is why awareness is important. Think about negotiation. A skilled negotiator listens carefully to what the other side values most. Sometimes it is money, sometimes it is timing, sometimes it is reputation, sometimes it is security. Once this is understood, negotiation becomes less about pressure and more about alignment. Another important idea in this chapter is observation. Greene suggests that people often reveal more than they realize. Their emotional reactions, tone changes, and repeated concerns often point towards their core motivations. For example, someone who constantly reacts strongly to criticism may have a sensitivity to respect or recognition. Someone who frequently talks about financial stability may be driven by security. Someone who seeks approval in conversations may value acceptance and belonging. These patterns create insight. Think about leadership again. A leader who understands what each team member values can assign roles more effectively, give feedback more precisely, and motivate more consistently. This leads to stronger performance and better relationships. Greene also warns that misunderstanding people's thumbscrews can create conflict. If you pressure someone in the area they care about most, they may react strongly or emotionally. For example, criticizing someone's core insecurity can damage trust, but understanding it can help you communicate more carefully and effectively. This is why emotional intelligence is so important in power dynamics. Noticing what drives people allows you to avoid unnecessary friction. Another key idea in this chapter is that people are often predictable in their core motivations, even if they appear complex on the surface. Their behavior may change in different situations, but their deeper emotional drivers remain consistent. Greene encourages readers to study people carefully, not casually. Pay attention to patterns over time. Notice repeated emotional responses. Observe what causes strong reactions. These are often clues to their psychological pressure points. Think about entrepreneurship or sales. A successful entrepreneur does not treat all customers the same. Instead, they understand what different customer groups value most and tailor messaging accordingly. This alignment between message and motivation creates influence. As the chapter develops, Greene emphasizes that power often comes from understanding human vulnerability, not to exploit it blindly, but to recognize how decisions are truly made. People like to believe they are fully rational, but emotions often play a major role in decision-making. Understanding this gives you clarity in how influence works. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. Everyone has something that strongly influences them: a desire, a fear, a need for recognition, a need for security. The deeper lesson is simple. Observe carefully. Listen deeply. Look beyond surface behavior. Because when you understand what truly moves people, you understand how influence actually works. And that is the power of discovering each man's thumbscrew. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Understand motivations. 2. Learn what drives people. 3. Listen carefully. 4. Build influence through understanding. 5. Improve communication effectiveness.
Chapter 34. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated one. Imagine 2 people walking into the same room. The first walks in quietly, slightly uncertain, watching how others react before he decides how to behave. He adjusts himself to the room. He shrinks when someone more dominant speaks. The second walks in calmly, with steady posture and natural confidence. He does not act superior, but he also does not act smaller than he is. He behaves as if he belongs there completely. Over time, people in the room begin to respond differently to each of them, not because of their titles, but because of how they present themselves. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 34th law of power. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated one. Greene argues that people often wait for external validation before they change how they see themselves. They wait for respect, recognition, status, or permission. But in reality, the way others treat you is strongly influenced by how you treat yourself first. If you present yourself with confidence, structure, and self-respect, others are more likely to respond the same way. If you present yourself as uncertain or overly submissive, people may unconsciously mirror that perception back to you. Think about a simple classroom or workplace situation. A person who constantly seeks approval, apologizes unnecessarily, or lowers their own presence often gets treated with less seriousness over time. Not always out of disrespect, but because people unconsciously respond to signals of self-worth. Now imagine someone who speaks clearly, maintains composure, and values their own time and input. Others begin to pay more attention. Greene's point is not about arrogance, it is about self-definition. Acting royal in this context means carrying yourself with dignity, clarity, and inner authority, regardless of your current position in life. Think about leaders who started from humble beginnings. They did not wait to become powerful before acting with confidence. Instead, they developed habits, posture, communication styles, and mindsets that reflected the identity they wanted to grow into. Over time, that identity became real through consistent behavior. One of the key lessons in this chapter is self-perception influences external perception. If you see yourself as small, others may treat you as small.
If you see yourself as capable and valuable, others are more likely to recognize that value. This does not mean pretending to be something you are not. It means expressing your best qualities consistently. Imagine two entrepreneurs. One constantly doubts his ideas, seeks approval before every decision, and hesitates to take responsibility. The other trusts his judgment, communicates with clarity, and takes ownership of outcomes. Even if both are equally skilled, their external perception will likely be very different. Greene also highlights that people often respond to signals of confidence more than formal status. Someone with a high position but weak presence may not command respect. Someone with lower position but strong presence may still gain influence. This is because human beings naturally interpret confidence as competence. However, Greene also warns that this law must be balanced carefully. False arrogance or forced superiority can backfire. People can sense insecurity hidden behind overconfidence. The goal is not to fake superiority. The goal is to develop genuine inner stability and express it naturally. Think about performers or public speakers. The most impactful ones are not necessarily the loudest or most aggressive. They are the ones who appear grounded, calm, and self-assured. Their presence alone communicates authority. Another important idea in this chapter is emotional independence. People who depend too heavily on external approval often lose their sense of direction. They adjust themselves constantly to others' expectations. But people who maintain internal self-worth are stable. They do not collapse when others disagree with them. They do not lose confidence when they are criticized. This stability creates respect. Greene suggests that when you act with self-respect, you train others how to treat you. If you tolerate disrespect, you normalize it. If you maintain standards, others adjust to those standards over time. Think about professional environments. A person who values their time, communicates clearly, and maintains boundaries is often treated with more seriousness than someone who constantly overextends themselves or accepts every demand, not because of superiority, but because of clarity. Another key lesson is consistency. Royal presence is not a single moment, it's a pattern. You do not become influential by acting confident once. You become influential by consistently presenting yourself with dignity across situations. Over time, this builds reputation, and reputation shapes power. Greene also emphasizes that perception often precedes reality. People decide how to treat you before they fully understand your abilities. This means your initial presentation matters deeply. How you speak, how you carry yourself, how you respond under pressure. These signals form early impressions that can influence long-term relationships. Think about job interviews. Two candidates may have similar skills, but the one who communicates calmly and confidently often leaves a stronger impression, not because they are necessarily better, but because they appear more certain. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. People often wait for the world to treat them with respect before they begin acting with self-respect. But in reality, the process works in reverse. The deeper lesson is simple. Carry yourself with dignity. Behave with confidence. Respect your own presence. Because when you act like you matter, people are more likely to believe you do. And that is the power of being royal in your own fashion. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Respect yourself. 2. Carry yourself with confidence. 3. Set high standards. 4. Develop self-worth. 5. Others often mirror your self-image.
Chapter 35. Master the Art of Timing. Imagine two traders watching the same stock chart. Both see the same opportunity, Both understand the same information. Both have similar knowledge, but only one of them enters at the right moment. The other enters too early and gets shaken out, or enters too late and misses the move entirely. The difference between success and failure is not always what you know, it is when you act. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 35th law of power: master the art of timing. Greene argues that timing is one of the most underestimated forms of power. People often focus on strategy, intelligence, or effort, but ignore the moment of execution. Yet even the best strategy can fail if applied at the wrong time. Think about crossing a busy road. The road itself does not change. The traffic patterns do not change. But your success depends entirely on when you choose to move. Move too early and you risk getting hit. Move too late and the opportunity is gone. Timing turns action into success or failure. Greene explains that every situation has its own rhythm. Some moments are right for bold action. Others are better for waiting, observing, and letting conditions develop. Imagine a business launching a new product. If the product is launched too early, before the market is ready, it may fail despite being good. If it is launched too late, competitors may already dominate the space. But if it is launched at the right moment, even an average product can succeed because conditions are favorable. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that patience is not passivity. Waiting is not doing nothing. It is observing, preparing, and positioning yourself for the right moment. Greene emphasizes that many failures come from impatience. People feel pressure to act quickly. They fear missing out. They rush decisions, but rushing often leads to misalignment with timing. Think about negotiations. A person who speaks too early may reveal too much. A person who waits too long may lose leverage. But someone who understands timing can use silence as power, speaking only when it creates maximum impact. Timing also applies to relationships and communication. There are moments when advice is accepted easily, and moments when the same advice is rejected. A skilled communicator knows when to speak and when to stay silent. Greene also highlights that timing is closely connected to awareness. You cannot master timing if you are not observing what is happening around you. Trends, emotions, momentum, and resistance all influence the right moment to act. Think about sports. A football player does not pass or shoot randomly. They wait for the exact opening when the defense is weak or misaligned. That split-second decision determines success. Another important idea in this chapter is alignment with momentum. Some actions work best when you move with the flow of events rather than against it. If momentum is already building, acting with it can amplify results. If momentum is against you, forcing action can lead to resistance. Greene suggests that powerful individuals learn to read when conditions are shifting. They don't just act, they synchronize. However, Greene also warns that overthinking timing can become a trap. Some people wait endlessly for the perfect moment and never act at all. Mastery of timing is not about delay without purpose. It is about readiness combined with awareness. Think about a performer backstage. They don't walk on stage immediately, but they also don't wait forever. They enter at the precise moment when the performance is ready and the audience is prepared. That balance is timing. Greene also points out that timing often separates amateurs from experts. Amateurs act based on emotion. Experts act based on conditions. Amateurs react. Experts observe and then respond. In business, leadership, investing, and even personal decisions, this difference becomes extremely important. A poorly timed decision can damage reputation, waste resources, or miss opportunities.
A well-timed decision can create momentum, influence perception, and maximize results. Another key lesson is that timing affects perception. The same action can be seen differently depending on when it is done. A statement made too early may seem reckless. The same statement made at a later time may seem insightful. A move made too soon may appear desperate. The same move made later may appear strategic. Timing shapes meaning. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Success is not only about what you do, it is also about when you do it. The deeper lesson is simple. Do not rush blindly. Do not delay endlessly. Observe the situation carefully. Understand the rhythm of events, and act when the moment is right. Because when you master timing, even small actions can produce powerful results. And that is the power of mastering the art of timing. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Patience is powerful. 2. Wait for the right opportunity. 3. Avoid rushing decisions. 4. Read the environment. 5. Timing can determine success.
Chapter 36. Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge. Imagine a child standing outside a shop window. Inside, there is a toy he really wants. He presses his face against the glass, frustrated. The more he focuses on it, the more he feels the absence. The toy becomes bigger in his mind than it actually is. It controls his emotions completely. Now, imagine the same child walking away without looking back. The toy still exists, but it no longer has power over him. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 36th Law of Power. Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge. Greene argues that desire becomes powerful only when you feed it attention. The more you focus on what you cannot control, cannot obtain, or cannot change, the more emotionally attached you become to it, and that attachment weakens your position. Think about everyday life. A person sees someone else's success and becomes obsessed with it. They constantly compare, constantly think about what they lack, constantly feel behind. Over time, this comparison drains their energy and focus. But another person sees the same success and simply acknowledges it, then returns their attention to their own path. They are aware, but not emotionally trapped. The difference is power. Greene explains that attention is a form of currency. Whatever you focus on grows in importance in your mind. If you give attention to frustration, it expands. If you give attention to envy, it deepens. If you give attention to loss, it intensifies. But when you withdraw attention, the emotional charge weakens. Think about conflicts. Many conflicts escalate not because of the issue itself, but because both sides keep feeding it attention. Each reaction strengthens the conflict. Now imagine one person refuses to engage emotionally. They do not chase the argument. They do not respond to every provocation. The emotional cycle breaks. The conflict loses momentum. One of the key lessons in this chapter is emotional detachment. Not coldness, not indifference to everything, but the ability to choose what deserves your attention and what does not. Greene emphasizes that many forms of power struggles rely on emotional reaction. If someone provokes you and you respond immediately, you are playing their game. But if you refuse to engage emotionally, you regain control. Think about social media. People often react strongly to opinions they disagree with, but those reactions give attention and energy to the very thing they dislike. Meanwhile, ignoring irrelevant negativity reduces its influence.
Greene's point is not about suppressing emotions, it is about managing attention strategically. Another important idea is psychological independence. When you constantly focus on what others have or what you lack, you lose control over your own direction. Your mind becomes reactive rather than intentional. But when you focus on your own goals, your own progress, and your own path, external distractions lose influence. Think about an athlete. If the athlete constantly compares himself to competitors during training, he loses focus. But if he concentrates on his own improvement, he builds consistent growth. Comparison creates distraction. Focus creates progress. Greene also highlights that ignoring something can sometimes be more powerful than reacting to it. Reaction gives importance. Silence removes it. Think about criticism. When someone tries to provoke a reaction and receives none, their influence weakens. The absence of response creates uncertainty, and uncertainty reduces control. However, Greene also warns that this law should not be confused with avoidance of responsibility. Ignoring something does not mean avoiding necessary action. It means refusing to give emotional power to things that do not deserve it. There is a difference between strategic detachment and neglect. One strengthens focus, the other weakens responsibility. Another key lesson is emotional economy. Your attention is limited. Your emotional energy is limited. If you waste it on everything, you weaken your ability to focus on what truly matters. Greene suggests that powerful individuals are selective with their attention. They choose carefully what deserves engagement and what should be dismissed. Think about leaders. A strong leader does not react emotionally to every minor criticism or distraction. They prioritize what is important and ignore what is not relevant to their goals. This selective attention preserves strength. As the chapter develops, Greene emphasizes that many people give power to things simply by reacting to them. But what you ignore loses influence. What you chase gains influence. What you obsess over gains control. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every desire deserves pursuit. Not every conflict deserves reaction. The deeper lesson is simple. Withdraw attention from what weakens you. Refocus on what strengthens you. Because when you stop feeding energy into things you cannot have or cannot change, they lose power over you. And that is the power of disdain and deliberate ignoring. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Focus on what you can control. 2. Don't waste energy on unavailable opportunities. 3. Move forward quickly. 4. Avoid obsession. 5. Direct attention toward productive goals.
Chapter 37. Create compelling spectacles. Imagine standing in a crowded street. 2 people are trying to get attention. The first speaks loudly, explaining his point again and again. People listen for a moment, then drift away. The second does something different. He doesn't speak much at all. Instead, he creates something visual, something unusual, striking, and impossible to ignore. Within seconds, people stop walking. Phones come out. Eyes lock in. Everyone is watching. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 37th Law of Power: create compelling spectacles. Greene argues that in a world where attention is limited, the most powerful force is not argument or logic, it is impact. People remember what they see more strongly than what they hear. A well-crafted spectacle can shape perception instantly without long explanations. Think about a movie scene. You don't remember every line of dialogue, but you remember powerful visuals, the moment, the emotion, the image that stayed in your mind.
That is the power of spectacle. Greene explains that human beings are highly visual and emotional creatures. When something stands out dramatically, it bypasses slow reasoning and goes directly into memory and emotion. This is why performances, ceremonies, presentations, and dramatic gestures have always been used throughout history to influence people. Think about leadership. A leader who only communicates through reports and explanations may be understood, but not deeply felt. But a leader who creates memorable moments, strong speeches, symbolic actions, or powerful gestures often leaves a deeper impression. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that perception is shaped by experience, not just information. People may forget what you say, but they rarely forget what they experience. Greene emphasizes that spectacle is not about meaningless drama. It is about creating controlled impact that directs attention and shapes perception. Think about marketing. Companies do not rely only on facts to sell ideas. They use visuals, storytelling, and emotional imagery to create desire. A product becomes more than an object, it becomes an experience. Even simple things can become powerful when presented dramatically. A basic announcement, if delivered in a memorable way, can feel important. The same message delivered without impact can be ignored. Greene also highlights that spectacle works because it breaks routine. People are constantly surrounded by repetition, similar messages, similar visuals, similar experiences. Something unexpected interrupts that flow and captures attention. Think about social media again. The posts that stand out are not always the most logical or detailed. They are often the most visually striking or emotionally engaging. Another important idea in this chapter is control of attention. In any competitive environment, attention is a form of power. If you control what people focus on, you influence what they think about. Spectacle is one of the fastest ways to direct attention. But Greene also warns that spectacle must be used carefully. If overused, it loses impact. If used without substance, it becomes empty. True power comes from combining spectacle with meaning. Think about historical speeches or major announcements. The most powerful ones were not only dramatic, they also carried real direction, purpose, or message underneath the presentation. Greene suggests that spectacle should enhance reality, not replace it. Think about a launch of a product. A simple announcement may be ignored, but a well-designed event with visuals, storytelling, and emotion can make the same product feel significant and desirable. The difference lies in presentation. Another key lesson is emotional memory. People may forget details, but they remember how something made them feel. Spectacle creates emotional imprinting. That emotional imprint can influence decisions long after the moment has passed. Greene also points out that silence and subtlety have limits in highly competitive environments. When attention is scattered, sometimes only strong visual or emotional signals can cut through noise. However, he also warns that relying only on spectacle without substance leads to weakness. If there is nothing behind the image, the influence fades quickly. Sustainable power requires balance. Substance gives depth. Spectacle gives visibility. Together, they create lasting influence. Think about leaders who are remembered. Often, they are not just logical thinkers or administrators, they are also symbolic figures whose actions or presence created strong impressions. Their impact was both practical and emotional. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. In a world full of noise, attention is rare, and what captures attention shapes perception. The deeper lesson is simple. Do not rely only on explanation. Do not assume people will notice quiet effort. Create moments that stand out. Shape experiences that people remember. Because when you create compelling spectacles, you do not just communicate, you dominate attention. And that is the power of spectacle. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. People remember visuals. 2. Presentation matters. 3. Make ideas easy to understand. 4. Create memorable experiences. 5. Capture attention effectively.
Chapter 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. Imagine a bird flying in a sky full of other birds. If it flies in a completely different direction, moving too strangely, too independently, it becomes noticeable. And anything that stands out too much can attract unwanted attention, criticism, resistance, or even danger. But if it moves with the flock on the surface while still choosing its own direction in its mind, it survives more smoothly. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 38th law of power. Think as you like, but behave like others. Greene argues that society is built on visible conformity. Every group, whether it's a workplace, community, or culture, has certain unwritten rules about behavior, speech, appearance, and attitude. People who openly break those rules often face resistance, even if their ideas are correct. At the same time, independent thinking is essential for personal power. So the challenge is balance. Maintain inner freedom while managing outer appearance. Think about a workplace environment. A person may have strong, unconventional ideas. If they express those ideas too aggressively or too early, they may be rejected, not because the ideas are wrong, but because they disrupt group comfort. But another person may hold the same ideas internally, observe carefully, and express them gradually in a way that fits the environment. Over time, their influence grows without unnecessary conflict. Greene emphasizes that behavior is often more important than belief when it comes to social acceptance. People judge what they can see. They respond to what is visible. This means you can think freely, question everything internally, and still choose to present yourself in a way that avoids unnecessary friction. Think about social settings. Different groups have different expectations, how people dress, speak, joke, or express opinions. Someone who completely ignores these expectations may appear disconnected or even disrespectful, even if their intentions are good. But someone who understands these expectations and adapts outward behavior while maintaining inner independence can move more smoothly through different environments. One of the key lessons in this chapter is social friction. When people behave too differently from the group, it creates discomfort. That discomfort often leads to resistance, exclusion, or misunderstanding. Greene suggests that it's often more strategic to blend outwardly while remaining independent inwardly. Think about workplace professionals in sensitive environments. They may hold private opinions that differ from the majority, but they choose carefully when and how to express them. This allows them to avoid unnecessary conflict while still preserving their autonomy. Another important idea is perception management. People often confuse visible behavior with inner belief. If someone behaves differently from the group, others may assume disagreement or opposition, even if that's not fully true. This is why behavior becomes a tool of strategy. You do not need to reveal every thought immediately. You do not need to challenge every norm openly. You can observe first, adapt outwardly, and choose your moments carefully. Greene also highlights that total conformity is not required either. The law is not about losing identity, it's about controlling expression. Think about creative individuals. Many successful innovators did not initially reveal their full ideas in environments that were not ready for them.
Instead, they adjusted how they presented themselves while continuing to develop their thinking privately. Over time, their ideas became more acceptable because timing and presentation were carefully managed. Another key lesson is survival in structured environments. In groups with strong traditions or hierarchies, open resistance can create unnecessary obstacles. Even if change is needed, sudden disruption may lead to rejection rather than progress. Strategic behavior allows gradual influence. Greene also warns against isolation. People who behave too differently outwardly may become disconnected from opportunities, relationships, or influence networks. Even if they are intelligent, lack of social alignment can limit their impact. However, Greene is also clear that this law is not about pretending to be someone you are not in a dishonest way. It's about understanding context. Different environments require different levels of adaptation. Think about diplomacy. Diplomats often operate in environments where tone, behavior, and presentation matter as much as content. A single mistake in expression can change perception, even if intent is good. This shows how powerful outward behavior can be. One of the strongest ideas in this chapter is that inner freedom and outer adaptation are not contradictions. You can think independently while still behaving strategically in social settings. This separation creates flexibility and allows you to maintain personal truth without unnecessary conflict. It also allows you to move through different environments more effectively. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. Not every thought needs to be expressed immediately. Not every belief needs to be displayed publicly. And not every difference needs to become a confrontation. The deeper lesson is simple. Think freely in your mind, but behave wisely in public. Because when you understand how to adapt your behavior while protecting your independence, you gain both freedom and influence. And that's the power of thinking as you like, but behaving like others. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Understand social norms. 2. Adapt to your environment. 3. Avoid unnecessary conflict. 4. Maintain independent thinking. 5. Build connections through respect.
Chapter 39. Stir up waters to catch fish. Imagine a calm lake. The water is still, clear, and quiet. On the surface, everything looks peaceful, but beneath that stillness, fish are moving carefully, hiding, watching, staying alert. Now imagine someone drops a stone into the water. Ripples spread everywhere. The surface becomes disturbed. Visibility changes. The fish become unsettled, moving unpredictably. In that moment of chaos, they become easier to catch. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 39th law of power: stir up waters to catch fish. Greene argues that clarity and stability in a situation often benefit those who already have control. But when the environment becomes emotionally or socially disturbed, hidden motives, weaknesses, and reactions begin to surface. And in that moment, power dynamics become easier to observe and sometimes easier to influence. Think about a workplace environment. In a calm and structured setting, people behave carefully. They hide frustrations, manage emotions, and maintain professional appearances. But when tension enters the system, conflict, uncertainty, competition, people begin to reveal more of what they truly think and feel. Hidden alliances become visible. Insecurities surface. Reactions become less controlled. Greene explains that controlled disruption can be a strategic tool. By slightly disturbing the surface, you can make hidden dynamics visible. Think about a negotiation. If everything is calm and predictable, each side carefully manages information,
But if tension is introduced through pressure, urgency, or unexpected changes, people may reveal their true priorities more quickly. One side might suddenly show desperation, another might expose flexibility, another might reveal hidden concerns. The disturbance does not create new reality, it reveals what was already there. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that stability often hides information. When everything is too smooth, it is harder to understand true intentions, but when pressure is applied, real behavior emerges. Greene is not suggesting constant chaos or conflict. Instead, he emphasizes strategic disruption, carefully applied situations that reveal what is otherwise hidden. Think about leadership. A leader who always keeps things perfectly controlled may never see how people behave under stress. But when a challenge or change occurs, true strengths and weaknesses become visible. That visibility can be useful for understanding the system. Another idea is emotional reaction as information. People often reveal more through reaction than through planned communication. What upsets them, what excites them, what they defend strongly, what they avoid. These responses provide insight into underlying motivations. Greene suggests that by observing reactions in disturbed situations, you gain deeper understanding of people and systems. Think about social dynamics. In calm situations, people may appear balanced and neutral, but when competition, disagreement, or tension is introduced, underlying personalities become clearer. Who becomes defensive? Who stays calm? Who tries to dominate? Who withdraws? Each reaction reveals something important. However, Greene also warns that stirring waters must be done carefully. Too much disturbance can destroy trust, relationships, or stability. The goal is not destruction. The goal is revelation. There is a difference between controlled disturbance and unnecessary chaos. Controlled disturbance creates insight. Uncontrolled chaos creates damage. Think about business environments. A leader may introduce change or challenge to test systems, improve adaptability, or identify weaknesses. But if done recklessly, it can harm morale and productivity. Balance is essential. Another key lesson is that power often comes from understanding hidden dynamics. What is visible is not always the full picture. Sometimes the most important information is revealed only when pressure is applied. Greene encourages readers to be observant during moments of disruption, because that is when truth becomes harder to hide. Think about sports teams. A team may look strong during practice, but under real pressure in competition, different behaviors emerge. Some players thrive, others struggle. Some take leadership, others withdraw. Those moments reveal true structure. Another insight is psychological exposure. When people are emotionally disturbed, their defenses weaken. They become more reactive, less calculated, and more transparent in their behavior. This can provide clarity, but it must be handled ethically and strategically. Greene's deeper message is not about manipulation for its own sake. It is about understanding how environments affect behavior. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Stillness does not always reveal truth. Sometimes clarity comes from disturbance. The deeper lesson is simple. Observe how people behave under pressure. Understand what changes when stability is disrupted, and recognize that hidden dynamics often surface when waters are stirred. Because in moments of controlled disruption, what is hidden becomes visible. And that is the power of stirring up waters to catch fish. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Stay calm when others are emotional. 2. Emotional control creates advantage. 3. Observe reactions carefully. 4. Don't react impulsively. 5. Think before acting.
Chapter 40. Despise the free lunch. Imagine two people offered a free opportunity. The first person immediately accepts, no questions asked. It looks easy, convenient, and without cost. But later, hidden expectations appear, obligations grow, control shifts quietly into someone else's hands. The second person pauses. He asks what is behind it. What is the real cost? Who benefits? What is expected in return? Sometimes he accepts, but only after understanding the full picture. Over time, the difference between them becomes clear. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 40th law of power: despise the free lunch. Greene argues that nothing in power dynamics is truly free. When something is offered without clear cost, the price is often hidden, sometimes in time, independence, reputation, or future obligation. Think about everyday life. A free service is offered, but it collects attention, data, or influence in return. A free favor is given, but later creates a sense of debt or expectation. A free shortcut saves effort now, but costs skill, discipline, or long-term strength. Greene's point is simple. Hidden costs are often more powerful than visible ones. Think about relationships in professional environments. Someone helps you generously at first. It feels supportive. But later, you may feel obligated to return favors, support decisions, or align with their interests, even when you do not fully agree. The free help quietly creates dependency. One of the key lessons in this chapter is awareness of exchange. Every action has a cost, even if it is not immediately visible. If you do not recognize the cost, you may unknowingly give away control. Greene explains that accepting too many free advantages can weaken independence over time. Think about learning. A person who constantly looks for shortcuts, quick answers, easy methods, minimal effort, may avoid struggle in the short term, but struggle is often where skill is built. Without it, long-term capability remains weak. On the other hand, someone who invests effort, even when shortcuts exist, builds stronger understanding and control. Another important idea in this chapter is dependency. When you accept something repeatedly without contributing value back, you may become dependent on the source. That dependency can shift power away from you. Think about business relationships. If one company becomes overly reliant on a single supplier who provides easy terms or special advantages, that supplier may eventually gain leverage in negotiations. The convenience becomes a vulnerability. Greene also highlights that true strength comes from self-sufficiency. When you rely less on free external support and more on your own capability, you maintain control over decisions and direction. Think about personal development. A person who builds their own skills, knowledge, and resources is harder to influence or control than someone who constantly depends on external help. One of the key lessons is awareness of hidden contracts. Not all agreements are written or spoken. Some are psychological. When someone gives you something, even without asking, it may create a subtle expectation of return. This expectation can influence your future behavior without you realizing it. Greene encourages readers to recognize these invisible exchanges, not to reject all help, but to understand what is really being exchanged. Another important idea is long-term thinking. Free offers often focus on immediate gain, but power requires thinking beyond the immediate moment. What does this cost later? What does this create over time? Does this increase your freedom or reduce it? Think about career decisions. A job that offers quick comfort or easy benefits may feel attractive at first, but if it limits growth, independence, or skill development, the long-term cost may be higher than expected. Greene's deeper message is not to refuse all help, but to remain conscious of value exchange.
Accepting support is not a problem, but blind acceptance without understanding consequences creates vulnerability. Another key lesson is respect for effort. When something costs nothing, people often undervalue it. But when something requires investment, discipline, or sacrifice, its value becomes clearer. This is why meaningful achievements often come from effort, not convenience. Greene also suggests that dependence on free resources can weaken personal strength over time. When everything is given, nothing is built internally. But when you build things yourself, you gain control, confidence, and resilience. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. Nothing comes without cost. Even when it looks free, the price is simply hidden. The deeper lesson is simple. Be cautious of easy offers. Understand what is being exchanged, and value what requires effort and investment. Because when you rely too much on what is free, you may slowly lose what is truly yours, your independence. And that is the power of despising the free lunch. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Value what you earn. 2. Nothing valuable comes without cost. 3. Invest in growth. 4. Avoid hidden obligations. 5. Appreciate quality over freebies.
Chapter 41. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. Imagine a young athlete joining a legendary team. Before him, a superstar once played in his position. Fans still remember that legend. Every move the new player makes is compared to the past. Even if he performs well, people say, he is good, but not like the old one. No matter what he does, he is measured against a shadow. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 41st Law of Power. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. Greene argues that when you directly follow someone highly respected or powerful, you inherit their shadow, and that shadow can make your own identity invisible. People don't see you as yourself, they see you as a comparison. Think about leadership in a company. A new manager replaces a highly successful leader. Even if the new manager is competent, employees constantly compare decisions, style, and results with the previous leader. The new leader is not judged on his own path, but against expectations set by someone else. This creates pressure and limits perception. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that context shapes judgment more than ability alone. You may be capable, skilled, and effective, but if you are placed in a position where expectations are already extremely high, your performance is often unfairly judged. Greene explains that following greatness too closely can trap you in comparison rather than allowing you to build your own identity. Think about creative fields. A filmmaker who directly follows a legendary director in a franchise or series often struggles to gain acceptance even if their work is strong. The audience is emotionally attached to the original vision. As a result, the new creator is constantly measured against nostalgia. Another important idea is psychological comparison. People rarely evaluate in isolation, they compare. So, when someone replaces a great predecessor, the reference point is already fixed at a very high level. This makes it difficult to create a fresh impression. Greene suggests that one way to handle this challenge is to redefine expectations or shift direction slightly, rather than trying to replicate the past. Think about business. If a company is known for a specific strong identity under a previous leader, the new leader may struggle if they try to copy the exact same style. Instead, gradually evolving the direction can help establish a new identity. Another key lesson in this chapter is independence of identity. When you recognize yourself for who you are, not who you replaced, your influence remains limited. Greene emphasizes that originality in position is as important as originality in action. Think about sports again.
A player who replaces a legend may perform better statistically, but still struggle to gain emotional acceptance from fans who are attached to the past. This is because emotional memory is stronger than rational evaluation. Greene also highlights that timing and placement matter in power dynamics. Sometimes it is better to enter a space when expectations are neutral rather than when they are already shaped by greatness. Starting fresh allows you to define your own standards. Another important idea is freedom from expectation pressure. When you step into a role with heavy legacy, you are often forced into defensive performance, trying not to disappoint rather than trying to innovate. This limits creativity. But when you build your own path, you operate with more freedom and less psychological burden. Greene also warns that comparison is unavoidable, but it can be managed. The goal is not to escape comparison entirely, but to avoid being trapped by it. Think about entrepreneurship. A startup entering a market dominated by a giant may struggle if it tries to copy everything exactly. But if it positions itself differently, it can create its own space rather than living in comparison. Another key lesson is emotional independence. When you constantly measure yourself against someone else's legacy, your confidence becomes unstable. Success feels insufficient. Progress feels invisible. But when you define your own path, success becomes clearer and more personal. Greene's deeper message is positioning. Where you enter matters as much as how you perform. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Greatness creates shadows, and shadows can obscure identity. The deeper lesson is simple. Be careful when following greatness too closely. Understand the weight of comparison, and choose positions where you can build your own identity. Because when you are not trapped in someone else's legacy, you have space to create your own. And that is the power of avoiding stepping into a great man's shoes. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Create your own path. 2. Develop original ideas. 3. Build your own reputation. 4. Learn from others without copying them. 5. Focus on your unique strengths.
Chapter 42. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. Imagine a flock of sheep moving together across a field. They feel safe because they follow a single leader. The shepherd guides them, keeps them organized, and gives them direction. As long as the shepherd is present, the flock stays controlled and unified. But if the shepherd suddenly disappears or is removed, the flock becomes confused, direction is lost, order breaks, the group scatters. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 42nd law of power. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. Greene argues that in many systems of power, influence is not evenly distributed. Instead, it is concentrated in key individuals, leaders, decision-makers, or central figures. If you can identify and neutralize the central source of control, the entire structure becomes unstable. Think about a company. Even if there are many employees, most direction comes from a few key leaders. If those leaders are removed, distracted, or undermined, the organization often loses coordination and clarity. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that systems often depend on central figures more than they appear to. On the surface, a group may look strong and organized, but underneath, control is usually concentrated. Greene suggests that understanding this structure is essential to understanding power itself. Think about social groups. In any group, there are often informal leaders, people others listen to, respect, or follow. These individuals shape opinions and behavior more than others.
If their influence changes, the group dynamic shifts quickly. Another important idea is strategic focus. Instead of trying to influence every individual in a system, it is often more effective to identify the central point of influence. Changing or impacting that point can affect the entire structure. Greene emphasizes that power is often indirect. You do not always need to engage with everyone. Sometimes influencing one key figure is enough to shift outcomes across the entire system. Think about politics or leadership structures. Many decisions are shaped by a small number of influential individuals. If their position changes, the larger group's direction may change as well. This shows how concentrated influence can be. Another key lesson in this chapter is leverage. Power is amplified when actions affect multiple outcomes through a single point of pressure. Instead of pushing many weak points, targeting one strong point can produce larger effects. Greene also highlights that confusion often follows the loss of leadership. When the central figure is removed or weakened, others may compete for direction. This creates instability and reduces coordination. Think about sports teams. When a team captain is injured or removed, the team may lose rhythm, coordination, and confidence. Even if the players are skilled, the structure becomes less stable. However, Greene also warns that this law must be understood carefully. It is not simply about aggression or elimination. It is about understanding structure and influence. In modern terms, it can also mean identifying key decision points in any system and understanding how they affect the whole. Think about business strategy. Instead of trying to influence every customer or employee individually, companies often focus on key decision makers or central channels that influence broader behavior. Another important idea is vulnerability of centralized systems. When power is too concentrated, the system becomes efficient but also fragile. Removing or weakening the central point can have large effects. Greene's deeper message is about understanding how systems are built. If you understand where control is concentrated, you understand where change is most effective. Think about communication networks, organizations, or even social groups. Influence often flows through key nodes rather than being evenly distributed. Another key lesson is observation. To apply this understanding, one must carefully observe who holds real influence versus who simply appears important. Formal titles do not always reflect actual power. Sometimes the most influential person is not the official leader, but someone behind the scenes who shapes decisions. Greene encourages readers to study these hidden structures. As the chapter develops, he emphasizes that power is rarely random. It follows patterns of influence, dependency, and control. Recognizing those patterns allows for more strategic thinking. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. Groups are often held together by key points of influence. Remove or shift those points, and the structure changes. The deeper lesson is simple. Identify the center of influence. Understand where real control lies, and recognize how systems respond when that center is disrupted. Because when you understand the shepherd, you understand the flock. And that is the power of striking the shepherd so the sheep will scatter. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Identify root causes. 2. Solve problems at the source. 3. Leadership affects outcomes. 4. Address key influencers. 5. Focus on high-impact actions.
Chapter 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. Imagine 2 leaders trying to win over a group of people. The first leader gives orders. He demands compliance. He uses pressure, rules, and authority. People follow, but only when they must. As soon as he leaves, their enthusiasm disappears. The second leader does something different.
He speaks in a way that connects emotionally. He understands what people care about, what they fear, and what they hope for. Instead of forcing agreement, he earns it. People follow not because they have to, but because they want to. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 43rd law of power: work on the hearts and minds of others. Greene argues that true influence does not come from control alone. It comes from shaping how people feel and think. When you influence both emotion, hearts, and reasoning, minds, your impact becomes deeper and more lasting. Think about leadership in any setting. A boss who only uses authority may get short-term obedience, but a leader who inspires trust, respect, and emotional connection often gains long-term loyalty. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that emotion is more powerful than instruction. People may understand what to do, but they are more likely to act when they feel motivated, respected, or understood. Greene explains that lasting influence is built when people internalize your message, not when they are forced to follow it. Think about teaching. A teacher can give students strict instructions, but if students are not emotionally engaged, they forget quickly. But when a teacher connects lessons to curiosity, meaning, or real-life relevance, students retain and apply knowledge more deeply. Another important idea is psychological alignment. When people feel that your goals align with their own interests, resistance decreases. Instead of feeling controlled, they feel understood. Greene emphasizes that influence becomes easier when people believe the idea is partly their own. Think about negotiation. If one side feels pushed into a decision, they resist. But if they feel the decision reflects their own interest, they cooperate more willingly. This is why persuasion often works better than pressure. Another key lesson in this chapter is trust. Hearts and minds cannot be influenced without trust, and trust is built through consistency, empathy, and understanding. People follow those they believe will not harm their interests. Greene suggests that emotional intelligence is essential for influence. You must understand how people feel, not just what they say. Think about relationships. A person who only argues logically may be correct, but still fail to connect. A person who also understands emotions often has stronger influence. Another important idea is communication style. How something is said often matters as much as what is said. Tone, timing, empathy, and framing all affect how messages are received. Greene explains that people are not purely rational listeners. They filter everything through emotion first. Think about public speaking. A speaker who connects emotionally with the audience creates stronger impact than one who only delivers facts. Even simple ideas can become powerful when delivered with emotional connection. Another lesson in this chapter is influence through identification. People are more likely to follow someone they feel they can relate to. If they see you as distant or disconnected, influence weakens, but if they feel understood, connection grows. Greene highlights that people don't just want direction, they want recognition. They want to feel seen, heard, and valued. When you meet that need, influence becomes natural. Think about leadership again. A leader who listens deeply, acknowledges concerns, and responds thoughtfully often builds stronger loyalty than one who only issues commands. Another important idea is internal motivation. Forced behavior disappears when pressure is removed, but emotionally driven behavior continues even without supervision. This is why working on hearts and minds creates lasting impact. Greene's deeper message is that control alone is unstable. True influence must be internalized. As the chapter develops, he emphasizes that people are guided by both logic and emotion, but emotion often leads. If you influence emotion, logic often follows. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. To influence others deeply, you must go beyond instructions. You must understand feelings, beliefs, and motivations. The deeper lesson is simple.
connect with people emotionally, speak to their thoughts and their feelings, build trust, not just compliance, because when you work on both hearts and minds, your influence becomes lasting. And that is the power of working on the hearts and minds of others. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Build trust first. 2. Influence through understanding. 3. Connect emotionally. 4. Listen actively. 5. Earn loyalty through respect.
Chapter 44. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. Every movement you make is reflected exactly back at you. If you smile, it smiles. If you frown, it frowns. If you raise your hand, it raises its hand. It feels familiar at first, but after a while it becomes uncomfortable, almost unsettling. Now imagine a person who behaves the same way with you in real life. They copy your tone, your attitude, your style of speaking, even your emotional reactions. At first, it feels like agreement, but slowly it begins to irritate you. You start to feel exposed, studied, even challenged. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 44th law of power: disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. Greene argues that mirroring is one of the most subtle psychological tools in human interaction. When used carefully, it can build trust, create connection, or unsettle opponents by reflecting their behavior back to them. Think about conversations. When someone subtly matches your tone, posture, or pace of speech, you often feel more comfortable around them without knowing why. This is because humans naturally trust what feels familiar. But when mirroring is too obvious or exaggerated, it can create the opposite effect. It can make people feel mocked, studied, or manipulated. One of the key lessons in this chapter is reflection creates influence. People often feel validated when they see their behavior reflected back to them. It creates a sense of understanding and agreement. They assume similarity means alignment. Greene explains that this psychological mechanism can be used both positively and strategically. Think about negotiation. If you mirror someone's concerns, language, or emotional tone, they may feel more understood and become more open. But if the mirroring is too precise or used aggressively, it can irritate or destabilize them. Another important idea is emotional disruption. When someone is confronted with their own behavior reflected back to them in an unexpected way, it can create discomfort. They may begin to question their actions or lose emotional balance. Greene emphasizes that this discomfort can shift power dynamics. Think about social situations. If someone is being overly aggressive and you calmly mirror their intensity without escalating, they may begin to feel their own behavior more clearly. This can reduce their dominance in the interaction. Mirroring removes the distance people feel between themselves and their actions. Another key lesson in this chapter is psychological awareness. Most people are not fully aware of how they appear to others. When their behavior is reflected back to them, it creates self-awareness that can be either disarming or irritating. Greene suggests that this awareness can shift control in conversations. Think about leadership or communication. A person who mirrors a group's concerns or emotions can create alignment and trust. People feel understood because their own perspective is reflected back. But if done poorly, it can feel manipulative and damage trust. Another important idea is subtlety. The mirror effect only works when it is not too obvious. If people notice they're being copied deliberately, they may become defensive. The power lies in natural reflection, not mechanical imitation. Think about relationships. People often connect more easily with those who naturally share similar communication styles or emotional expressions.
This creates comfort without conscious effort. Greene also highlights that mirroring can reveal hidden intentions. When someone's behavior is reflected back to them, they may unintentionally expose their own emotional state more clearly. For example, a tense person becomes more aware of their tension when it is mirrored, which can weaken their control over the interaction. Another lesson in this chapter is emotional balance. Mirroring can neutralize extremes. If someone is aggressive, calm mirroring can soften the interaction. If someone is overly emotional, steady mirroring can stabilize the tone. This creates a subtle form of control through reflection rather than confrontation. Greene's deeper message is that people are often influenced by their own image. When they see themselves reflected, literally or behaviorally, they react more strongly than when they are simply told something. As the chapter develops, he emphasizes that influence often comes from returning behavior back to its source in a controlled way. Not through force, not through argument, but through reflection. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. People are deeply affected by how they see themselves in others. The deeper lesson is simple. Observe behavior carefully. Reflect it strategically when appropriate. Use mirroring to create understanding or unsettle imbalance. Because when you control the reflection, you influence perception. And that is the power of the mirror effect. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Reflect behavior strategically. 2. Build rapport through similarity. 3. Increase understanding. 4. Use empathy effectively. 5. Observe before responding.
Chapter 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Imagine someone renovating a house. The house is old, slightly damaged, and clearly needs improvement. But instead of fixing it gradually, the person tears down almost everything at once. Walls, structure, foundation, trying to rebuild it in one go. For a short moment, there's excitement about the transformation, but soon chaos begins. People inside the house feel lost. Nothing is familiar anymore. What was meant to improve life suddenly creates instability. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 45th Law of Power. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Greene argues that people naturally resist sudden, extreme change. Even when change is necessary, too much of it at once creates fear, confusion, and resistance. People are more comfortable with gradual transformation than with total disruption. Think about organizations or societies. When changes are introduced slowly and carefully, people adjust. But when everything is changed too quickly, even positive reforms can trigger backlash. One of the key lessons in this chapter is human psychology values familiarity. People build emotional attachment to routines, systems, and expectations. When these are suddenly removed, they feel insecure, even if the new system is better. Greene explains that successful change requires balance between innovation and stability. Think about leadership. A leader may see that a team or organization needs improvement, but instead of forcing all changes immediately, a wise leader introduces adjustments step by step. This allows people to adapt emotionally and practically. Another important idea is resistance to disruption. When people feel that too much is changing at once, they often resist not because the change is bad, but because the speed of change feels threatening. Greene emphasizes that resistance is often emotional, not logical. Think about technology. When new tools or systems are introduced too quickly, users may struggle not because they are incapable, but because they need time to adjust. Gradual transition reduces friction. Another key lesson in this chapter is perception management.
People are more likely to accept change when they feel involved in the process and when change feels controlled rather than chaotic. Greene suggests that framing change as evolution rather than disruption makes it easier to accept. Think about politics or organizations. Leaders who promise radical transformation often face stronger resistance than those who promise improvement through steady progress. Even if the end goal is the same, the path matters. Another important idea is emotional pacing. Change is not only about structure, it is about timing and psychological readiness. If people are not emotionally prepared, even beneficial change can feel threatening. Greene explains that timing and scale of reform must match the tolerance of the environment. Think about personal relationships. Sudden drastic changes in behavior or expectations can create tension, but gradual adjustments are easier to accept and integrate. Another lesson is control through stability. When people feel that some things remain stable, they are more open to change in other areas. Stability acts as emotional grounding. Greene highlights that successful reformers often maintain continuity while introducing innovation. They preserve enough familiarity to avoid fear, while introducing enough change to improve systems. Think about business transformation. Companies that overhaul everything at once often struggle, but those that evolve step by step tend to maintain trust and long-term success. Another important idea in this chapter is trust. People trust leaders who respect their need for stability. When change feels forced or overwhelming, trust weakens. But when change feels measured and thoughtful, trust can even increase. Greene's deeper message is that influence is not only about direction, but also about pace. As the chapter develops, he emphasizes that people can accept almost any change if it is introduced in manageable steps, but even good ideas can fail if introduced too aggressively. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization. Change is necessary for growth, but too much change too fast creates resistance. The deeper lesson is simple. Advocate for improvement. Introduce change gradually. Respect emotional adjustment. Because when reform is paced correctly, people adapt instead of resisting. And that is the power of managing change wisely. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Introduce change gradually. 2. Respect traditions. 3. Communicate benefits clearly. 4. Manage resistance. 5. Build support step by step.
Chapter 46. Never appear too perfect. Imagine a crystal glass placed on a table. It looks flawless, clear, shining, without a single mark. At first, people admire it, but slowly that perfection starts to make others uncomfortable. They begin to look for cracks, even where none exist. And if they find the smallest flaw, their attention suddenly shifts to it, almost obsessively. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 46th law of power. Never appear too perfect. Greene argues that perfection can create envy, suspicion, and hidden hostility. When people see someone who appears flawless, they often begin to compare themselves, and that comparison can turn admiration into resentment. Think about a workplace. A person who constantly appears to have everything under control, never makes mistakes, and always succeeds may initially be respected. But over time, others may begin to feel insecure or even skeptical. They may start searching for flaws or assuming hidden advantages. One of the key lessons in this chapter is human psychology does not respond comfortably to perfection. People relate more easily to those who show balance, strength mixed with small imperfections that feel human and approachable. Greene explains that perfection can create distance. It makes others feel separated from you, as if you belong to a different level. That distance reduces emotional connection. Think about leadership. A leader who appears completely flawless may be respected, but not necessarily trusted emotionally.
but a leader who shows competence along with humility and occasional vulnerability often feels more relatable and accessible. Another important idea is envy. Envy is one of the strongest emotional reactions in social environments. When someone appears too perfect, it can trigger comparison, and comparison often leads to discomfort or resentment. Greene emphasizes that managing perception is not about hiding success, but about balancing it in a way that does not provoke unnecessary emotional backlash. Think about social media. People who only display perfect moments, success, beauty, wealth, often attract admiration, but also skepticism or envy. But those who show a more balanced picture tend to feel more relatable. Another key lesson in this chapter is strategic imperfection. Small, harmless flaws can actually strengthen connection. They make a person seem more real, more human, and less threatening. Greene suggests controlled imperfection can reduce resistance from others. Think about communication. If someone speaks too perfectly all the time, others may feel intimidated or disconnected. But natural pauses, humility, and acknowledgement of limits can make communication more effective. Another important idea is psychological safety. People feel more comfortable around those they perceive as approachable rather than untouchable. Perfection creates distance. Imperfection creates connection. Greene highlights that influence often depends on relatability as much as capability. Think about teamwork. A highly skilled person who also admits mistakes or shares learning experiences often gains stronger cooperation than someone who always appears perfect and unapproachable. Another lesson in this chapter is vulnerability as strategy, not weakness, but controlled openness. When people see that you are not perfect, they may lower their guard and feel more comfortable interacting with you. Greene is not suggesting incompetence or careless behavior. Instead, he's emphasizing balance, strength that is not intimidating, success that is not alienating. Think about business leaders. Those who acknowledge challenges, setbacks, or learning moments often build stronger trust with their audience than those who only present success. Another important idea is emotional perception. Perfection can sometimes create distance because it feels unrealistic. People trust what feels real more than what feels idealized. Greene suggests influence grows when people feel emotionally connected, not when they feel overshadowed. Another key lesson is hidden competition. When others perceive someone as too perfect, they may begin to look for ways to challenge or undermine them. This is not always conscious, it is often psychological balancing. By showing controlled imperfection, you reduce unnecessary competition and tension. Greene's deeper message is that influence is not only about strength, but also about approachability. As the chapter develops, he emphasizes that too much perfection can isolate you socially, even if it increases admiration. But balanced presentation creates connection, trust, and long-term influence. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a deeper realization. People are drawn to what feels human, not flawless. The deeper lesson is simple. Be strong, but not untouchable. Be successful, but not distant. Be capable, but still relatable. Because when you avoid appearing too perfect, you become easier to trust and harder to resent. And that is the power of controlled imperfection. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Stay humble. 2. Accept imperfections. 3. Avoid creating envy. 4. Be relatable. 5. Keep learning and improving.
Chapter 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop. Imagine an archer standing in front of a target. He draws the bow, focuses carefully, and releases the arrow. It hits the center, perfect aim. But instead of stopping there, he keeps shooting again and again, trying to prove his accuracy, pushing further and further. Eventually, his hand gets tired, his focus weakens, and his next arrows begin to miss.
What started as success slowly turns into decline. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 47th law of power. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop. Greene argues that one of the most dangerous moments in power is after success. When people win, they often feel invincible. That confidence can quickly turn into overextension, doing too much, pushing too far, or trying to extract more than necessary from a situation. Think about business. A company launches a successful product. Instead of consolidating that success, they immediately expand too aggressively. New markets, new features, new risks. The original strength becomes diluted, and what was stable begins to weaken. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that victory requires discipline just as much as struggle does. Winning is not the end of strategy. It is a new stage where control becomes even more important. Greene explains that many failures happen not during the struggle, but after success, when restraint disappears. Think about negotiations. If one side wins a favorable deal, pushing further may seem tempting, but overreaching can damage trust, trigger resistance, or reverse gains. Sometimes the strongest move after winning is stopping at the right point. Another important idea is emotional overconfidence. Success often creates a psychological high. People start believing they can do more than they actually should. This leads to unnecessary risks. Greene emphasizes that emotional control after success is just as important as emotional control during difficulty. Think about sports. A team that takes a strong lead may become careless, start experimenting too much, or lose focus. The opponent, meanwhile, becomes more disciplined and may recover. Overconfidence often leads to collapse. Another key lesson in this chapter is strategic withdrawal. Knowing when to stop is a form of intelligence. It preserves gains, protects reputation, and maintains stability. Greene suggests that restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. Think about personal goals. A person who achieves a milestone but immediately pushes beyond limits without rest or structure may burn out or lose direction. But someone who consolidates progress before moving forward builds sustainable success. Another important idea is perception of control. People respect those who know when enough is enough. Overreaching can make success look greedy or unstable, but stopping at the right moment creates an image of discipline and confidence. Greene highlights that timing does not only apply to action, it also applies to stopping action. Knowing when to exit is as important as knowing when to enter. Think about investing. Selling at the right time can protect gains. Waiting too long out of greed can turn profit into loss. The same principle applies across life decisions. Another lesson in this chapter is sustainability. Long-term power is not built on maximum short-term gain, but on consistent control over outcomes. Stopping at the right point ensures that success remains stable instead of fragile. Greene also warns about the trap of proving oneself repeatedly. After success, people often feel the need to justify it by doing more, but unnecessary repetition can weaken the original achievement. Sometimes, leaving success untouched preserves its strength. Think about leadership. A leader who achieves a major success and then continues to push aggressively without pause may eventually create fatigue or resistance within the system. But a leader who consolidates gains strengthens long-term stability. Another important idea is restraint as strength. In many cases, the ability to stop yourself is more powerful than the ability to act. It shows control over emotion, ego, and impulse. Greene's deeper message is that power is not just about winning, it's about maintaining what you win. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a powerful realization.
Success is not only about reaching the goal, it's also about knowing when to stop. The deeper lesson is simple. Achieve your objective. Do not overreach. Consolidate your gains. Because when you stop at the right moment, you protect your victory instead of risking it. And that's the power of knowing when not to go past the mark you aimed for. 5 key lessons from this chapter. Know when to stop. Avoid overconfidence. Celebrate wins carefully. Maintain discipline after success. And protect what you've achieved.
Chapter 48. Assume formlessness. Imagine water in your hands. When you try to hold it tightly, it slips away. When you pour it into a cup, it takes the shape of the cup. When you place it in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Water does not resist its container, it adapts to it. Now imagine something far more powerful. A person who can adapt like water. No fixed shape, no rigid form, able to shift depending on the situation, the environment, and the pressure around them. This is the core idea behind Robert Greene's 48th law of power. Assume formlessness. Greene argues that rigidity is one of the greatest weaknesses in any system, whether it is a person, an organization, or a strategy. When you are too fixed in your identity, habits, or methods, you become predictable. And anything predictable can be controlled, challenged, or defeated. Think about business. Companies that refuse to adapt to changing markets often decline, even if they were once powerful. Their structure becomes too rigid. Their thinking becomes too fixed. Meanwhile, more flexible competitors adjust and survive. One of the key lessons in this chapter is adaptability. It is a form of survival. The world is constantly changing. Economies shift. People change. Technology evolves. Situations transform. If you remain rigid, you eventually clash with change. But if you adapt, you move with it. Greene explains that formlessness is not chaos, it is controlled flexibility. Think about leadership. A leader who insists on only one way of doing things may struggle when conditions change. But a leader who can adjust strategy, tone, and approach depending on the situation remains effective across different environments. Another important idea is unpredictability. When people can clearly predict your reactions, decisions, or behavior, they can position themselves against you. But when you remain adaptable, your actions become harder to anticipate. This gives you strategic advantage. Think about conflict or negotiation. If one side knows exactly how you'll respond, they can prepare accordingly. But if your response shifts depending on circumstances, they lose certainty, and certainty is often what allows control. Greene emphasizes that form gives others something to target. Formlessness removes that target. Another key lesson in this chapter is emotional flexibility. People often get trapped in fixed identities, how they see themselves, and how they believe they must act. But rigid identity can limit options. For example, someone who always sees themselves as the quiet one may avoid speaking up even when necessary. Someone who sees themselves as always aggressive may struggle to adjust tone when calmness is needed. Formlessness allows you to choose behavior based on situation, not identity. Think about sports. The most successful players are not rigid in style. They adjust tactics depending on opponent, timing, and conditions. Their strength lies in adaptability, not repetition. Greene also highlights that systems themselves are constantly shifting. Markets, relationships, organizations, and social environments are never static. So strategies that rely on fixed conditions eventually fail. Another important idea is resilience. When you are formless, you are harder to break. Pressure that normally damage a rigid structure simply causes you to adjust. Like water, you absorb pressure and continue moving. Greene's deeper message is that power is not about holding a fixed position. It is about remaining effective in changing conditions. Think about long-term success. People who cling too tightly to one method, one identity, or one strategy often struggle when circumstances shift. But those who remain flexible continue progressing. Another key lesson in this chapter is awareness of change. To be formless, you must observe constantly. You must recognize when conditions are shifting and adjust accordingly. This requires humility, the understanding that no single approach works forever. Greene also warns that formlessness does not mean lack of direction. Water still moves toward a destination, but it does not resist the shape of the path it takes. Similarly, adaptability should serve purpose, not confusion. Think about leadership again. Strong leaders maintain vision, but adjust methods. Weak leaders become attached to methods and lose vision when conditions change. As the chapter comes to an end, Greene leaves us with a final realization. The world does not stay the same, and neither should your approach. The deeper lesson is simple. Do not become fixed. Do not become predictable. Do not become rigid in a changing world. Because when you assume formlessness, you cannot be easily contained, controlled, or defeated. And that is the final law of power. 5 key lessons from this chapter. 1. Adapt to change. 2. Stay flexible. 3. Avoid rigid thinking. 4. Learn continuously. 5. Evolve with circumstances.
Conclusion. The ultimate lesson of the 48 laws of power. Imagine a man sitting alone late at night. The world outside is still moving. People are chasing success, building businesses, competing for opportunities, winning, losing, leading, following. But in this quiet moment, he reflects on a simple question. What truly separates those who shape their destiny from those who are shaped by it? As he thinks back on his life, he realizes the answer was never money, status, talent, or luck alone. It was awareness, the ability to understand people, the ability to understand himself, and the ability to understand the invisible forces that influence every human interaction. Because power is not something reserved for kings, presidents, CEOs, or celebrities. Power exists everywhere, in every conversation, every negotiation, every relationship, every opportunity, every decision. And whether we realize it or not, we are all affected by it every single day. Throughout this journey of the 48 laws of power, we have discovered that power is not loud. It does not always announce itself. It often works silently through perception, through timing, through reputation, through influence, through emotional control, and through a deep understanding of human nature. We learned that reputation can open doors that talent alone cannot. We learned that emotions, when left uncontrolled, can become our greatest weakness. We learned that people are often driven more by feelings than by logic. We learned that strategic thinking is more valuable than impulsive action. We learned that relationships create opportunities and trust creates influence. We learned that adaptability is strength and rigidity is weakness. And perhaps most importantly, we learned that true power begins with self-awareness. Because before you can understand others, you must understand yourself. Before you can influence the world around you, you must learn to master your own thoughts, emotions, and reactions. That is the deeper lesson hidden beneath all 48 laws. Not domination,
not manipulation, not control over others, but control over yourself. Because the person who cannot control their emotions can be controlled by someone else. The person who cannot understand human nature can be deceived by it. And the person who cannot think strategically will always be reacting instead of leading. The greatest lesson of this book is that life is a game of awareness. Some people move through life blindly, reacting to circumstances. Others learn to observe, understand, anticipate, and act with intention. The difference between those two paths often determines the difference between influence and irrelevance, leadership and dependency, success and regret. If there's one sentence that captures the essence of this entire book, it is this: power comes from understanding people, protecting your reputation, controlling your emotions, thinking strategically, building strong relationships, and adapting wisely to a constantly changing world. But remember this: knowledge alone changes nothing. A book does not change a life. An idea does not change a life. Action changes a life. The real value of these lessons begins the moment you apply them, the moment you become more observant, more disciplined, more strategic, more aware, more intentional. Because every day you are writing the story of your future through your decisions, and every decision is influenced by what you choose to notice, understand, and act upon. So, as you leave this journey, do not simply remember the laws, observe them, study them, recognize them in the world around you, and most importantly, use them wisely. Because power is not about controlling the world, it is about understanding it. And when you truly understand it, you gain the ability to navigate it with confidence, wisdom, and purpose. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for investing in your growth, your knowledge, and your future. If you found value in this summary, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Mind X Millions. Your support helps us bring more life-changing ideas from the world's greatest books to this community. And don't keep this knowledge to yourself. Share this video with your family, friends, colleagues, and anyone who wants to grow, lead, succeed, and better understand the world around them. Because one powerful idea shared at the right moment can change the course of someone's life forever. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep thinking strategically, keep mastering yourself, and keep becoming the most powerful version of who you can be. I'll see you in the next powerful book summary.